Welcome to the LDT Speaker Series. I'm Mario Amir Lawson, the president of the LDT Society. What is the LDT Speaker Series? Well, the LDT Speaker Series is an event created by the Lambda Delta Tau Society as an opportunity for our members to meet and learn from professionals in the instructional design community. The keynote speaker for this fall term event has been chosen based on student interest collected by surveys we sent out earlier this term. So this 1 hour presentation is for all USC students and anyone who would like to join and learn. And the event is hosted for about an hour, twice a year. That is both terms. So today's speaker, I'm excited to present today's speaker because her name is Cecile, and I was going to say Cecilia because I love her long name, and I know she's like, I like it shorter, but her name is Cecil Cheng, and she is a fellow Trojan and graduate of the USC Rossier School of Education's Learning Design and Technology Master's Program. That's us, folks. That's why I'm so excited, because this is somebody who's come before us and given us an opportunity, or is giving us an opportunity to share what they've learned, the valuable information they learned. She's worked with billion-dollar corporations like Edwards Lifesciences and Pretium partners, as well as world-class universities such as University of California in Los Angeles. All right. She is the founder of elearningdesigners.org and currently works as a senior instructional designer at the University of California, Los Angeles as well. Cecile graduated from USC's LDT program in 2017 and has a bachelor's degree in political science from UC Riverside. But I think she's a true one. What do you think? Today, she'll be sharing her experience and tips as a former instructional design graduate, and she is currently working in the field, her experience working in the field. So without further ado, welcome, Cecile.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Mario. I feel like we're in like a old school, like DaVita, their corporate stuff. I don't know if you guys have ever seen, do you know? Cassandra's laughing. If you've seen the guy from DaVita, like the CEO, when he rallies people, then you would know exactly what I mean. But thank you for that warm introduction. I just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit, just real talk about what my life has been like since I graduated with my master's degree again in 2017, and maybe some of the lessons I learned along the way to hopefully help you navigate your post-graduation career and journey, especially for those of you who did not come into the program with instructional design or educational background. I think you may be able to, I can definitely relate with you guys, and you may hopefully find some of this useful. And okay, so let's get started. I'm gonna keep this kind of short and sweet, and then we'll have time for some questions, and I'll show you guys an exercise I'll share with everyone in case you're interested. I think it's a good way to, it's a good thing to do at the very beginning of your job search, which I think you guys are all either in this process right now or about to embark on. So, okay, so my empowerment promise to you is that I will provide you with a very short list of actionable items that you'll be able to get started on today to make yourself more marketable as an instructional designer. But before we get into that, I felt like there is a very important message that I wanted to share with you. So I do promise to get to the very practical stuff a little bit later. But I just wanted to make, during the chaos of finding a job and, you know, finding that first instructional design role, I just wanted to make sure that I try to emphasize, and I know it's easier to hear this than to actually like internalize it, but you know, you are not your job title. And in pre-pandemic times, you know, whenever I met someone, either at a party, a bar, a conference, really whatever, right? 99% of the time, the conversation would go kind of like, the other person would be like, hi, I'm so-and-so. And I would say, hi, I'm Cecile. And then the person would ask what I would do. I'm not exactly sure when it became socially acceptable. And perhaps it's not in other countries, but it definitely is here to ask about someone's profession, like right after learning about their name, right? So no doubt this has become a norm and has caused the significance of the job title and the company that you work for to really carry an unsubstantiated amount of weight. And I think this is just a very important thing to address kind of in society, and as there is so much pressure probably on you right now, either by yourself, by family, friends, probably mainly by yourself, to land that first role. So I just kind of wanted to try to remind people, I know it's easier said than to internalize, but you could get, I mean, from my experience with job search, you know, you can get rejected by a company that you've never heard of, it's really small, it's an entry-level job, and then a huge tech company will come knocking on your door trying to recruit you. So it's really important not to ascribe too much value, or if possible, not to ascribe any valuable value to that. And just know that if you are, you know, always open to learning and improving yourself and really being self-aware and kind of like deconstructing, you know, what's going on, what you have to offer and what they're looking for, then persistence will get you there. So I know it can be a very hard time. So I just wanted to make sure we did talk about that. All right, so I have some other notes, but I don't think I'm going to talk about all of those. So let's see. So I know it can definitely be hard if you don't come from an instructional design background to try to market yourself. It's very possible that your professional background may be different. Mine was very administrative, and that was one of the hardest things to do, was to know how to modify my resume so that just the relevant salient points, salient to the job, right, points were highlighted. I think that especially when you're like maybe younger in your professional career and you haven't done that many different things, like you find yourself like piling on like every skill you have, right, every great thing that you did. But it's hard. You really have to try to put yourself in the eyes of the employer and really just pick out what is relevant and remove everything else. If there is not a direct argument that you can make about a specific experience or skill set to why it's going to help you or give you a unique perspective in the job you're seeking, then it should be removed. So I do have a few things to share today, and one is a short list, and maybe I'll share my screen and kind of talk about that, and then we can go through the introductory exercise, and maybe we can do some Q&A. So let me go ahead and share this screen, unless someone else wants to queue it up, but I think I can do it. Right. All right, give me one moment. So we got to this a lot faster than I alluded to, but these are just some very, very simple 5 tips for job seeking for instructional design roles. Number 1, you're going to want to make sure that your LinkedIn job title matches the position that you want to go for. And yes, they can be different, but the majority of the positions that you're interested in, even if you're not working at it right now, I know some people are uncomfortable with that, but no, I would recommend you putting instructional designer. And actually, now that I've been very active on LinkedIn, posting for my startup, elearningdesigners.org community, now that I am actively posting, I actually get a lot of DMs from, you know, teachers who want to transition to instructional design, and then other people who have just finished master's programs or academies like idle courses, who reach out to me asking me for some advice. And there's one, and sometimes I reach out to them. There's one guy, his title, he actually put entry-level instructional designer on his job title, and I was like, no, don't do that. You know, you're an instructional designer. You know, you may be new, and that's fine. And like at most, I say, like, if you're still uncomfortable, you can put junior instructional designer. But I always try to encourage people, no, put the job title you want. You know, if you're actively diligently working to get those skills, you're building out your portfolio, it's fine. You know, don't there's a million people who are going to write you off. You don't need to like help them out with that. So that's my first tip. And the second tip I've kind of already discussed is removing irrelevant experience. And sometimes your background, maybe you're undergrad, or maybe you already have a graduate degree, a different one is not instructional design, or it's not related. As long as you can kind of, and a good place to kind of like highlight this is in your summary at the very top of your resume. If you can, like, I know somebody who her degree is in educational psychology, but she's now in instructional design. And I was like, well, if you can kind of frame that in a way that it gives you a unique perspective as an instructional designer, then you should. Yeah, so I'm not saying to remove like your undergraduate degree on there or other master's degrees. You probably want to keep that, but I am talking about when it comes to job experience, typing 110 words per minute, probably not as helpful, right? But if it project management skills, yes, even though that's not actually taught in like a master's program for instructional design, that is a very real currency, especially even in higher ed, not even just in L&D or corporate learning and development. Another thing is to optimize your resume for applicant tracking systems, or ATS. There is a really good website, and I'll give I linked to it on my job search document. This website is so good that I will be completely honest. There was like a little amount of time where I didn't want to share it with everybody. I didn't want to like turn up my competition, but you gotta, I don't know. I'm trying something new. I'm like, I'm going to share the knowledge I have and put it out into the universe to see what happens. But there is a company that does this particularly well. They're probably not the only company, but they're the one that I've used, and it has literally been like night and day sending out my resumes and getting pings back. So when we say optimize your resume for ATS, we mean like if the job description says a certain word 5 times, it tells you how many times your resume says it. Like not even just matching words, we're even talking about the frequency of each word. So this does take a lot more time. The software helps, but it's still pretty labor intensive. But I found that, your resume will just catch a lot more. And I know in the early phases, you're just trying to get a call back. You're trying to get your first round call. I can't even remember what it's called right now. Oh, anyways, next thing is to have a very high level portfolio. I know you all worked really, really hard on capstone projects, but nobody wants to read a 27-page paper or even 27 pages of anything. So I would say really, really keep it short. Show your thinking process, show your design process. Either you want to use the ADDIE model or successive approximation model, SAM, or whatever other hybrid model you use. I would say at least have one with ADDIE because it's still the most pervasive. And it's the one that people are going to recognize, and people really do gravitate towards what they already know. So I would have at least one project where you're going to outline the different ADDIE stages of development and how you went through, but you want to keep it really short. I would say like 300 to 800 words, like max, and it's shorter is better. And if you have like, let's say a slideshow presentation, I know when I worked with somebody on my team, Dana, who just got hired as a junior instructional designer at Qualtrics. She does not have a formal instructional design background, so actually that's probably not great to mention in this talk. But I mentored her and I prepped her for the job market and for these interviews. So that's, take it with a grain of salt. That's an end group of 1, but I am going to work with some more people, and we're going to see how that goes. But I guess she had a bunch of projects. Her specialization, she studied cognitive science and user experience and user interface, which is kind of starting to blend together more and more with instructional design these days, as you'll notice, like a lot of job descriptions for learning experience designers. So she did have the user experience design background, but she didn't have any instructional design background. And some of her projects also worked in her portfolio. And I can also maybe show you guys that too as well, or add it to the resource. But essentially she had a whole bunch of screenshots, but you just want to have like maybe two different images for that project. Very, very few. You want to keep it minimal. You want to show that you can do lots of different things in different contexts. So if you worked across different industries, that works. And if you're having trouble finding projects, that is one thing that my community tries to help with. I know it can be really hard to try to get that real world experience, but hopefully you're able to do that. And I know that USC is also like expanding their internship opportunities and their post-graduation resources for that. So the very last thing on this list is to practice STAR interviews. That's simply an acronym for situation, task, action, and results. I also put a link to that in the document that I share. This is also how Amazon likes to do their interviews. And I actually found this resource that looks really good. I can't say I know the person who did it because I don't, but it seems like a very, very good resource for people who want to target corporate instructional design jobs at tech companies, because it's very different. Now that I've worked in both higher ed and in corporate instructional design, I would say that they're pretty much night and day on everything from resource to timelines to processes to what you're really they're so different. And there's really exciting things about both of them. But if you are trying to go for those like big name, big tech companies, you do have to prepare for it in a very specific way. So I think that that's a really good resource if you want to go that route. And if you do want to go that route, that's where you're going to want to make sure you do have very media rich, very polished, commercialized looking pieces on your ID portfolio, because they want to know that you're able to do that. So I think that covers the 5 tips for instructional design job seeking. I'm going to pull up the other document in case, and then kind of get started on that in case unless there are some questions, or if we want to do some of that beforehand, just let me know. Okay. All right, can everyone see my?
I was going to say, can you repeat what you said about the situation, task, actions, and results, right? That's actions and results, right?
Yeah, it can be. I mean,
I was just wondering the acronym. I just wanted to make sure I had it right.
Yeah, situation, task, action, and results. But yes, it could be more than one action. It's a very popular, sometimes they call it like STAR interview format, sometimes they call it STAR method or technique. But that's definitely what I recommend when you are interviewing. That's how I prep for it, and I'll like write a few situations out. You probably don't want to have too many, because you have to be ready like when they ask you questions. And of course there are questions you should always be ready for no matter what, which is tell me about yourself. Okay, and that should be between like 2 to 5 minutes, and it should highlight all of your professional achievements, relevant experiences, accomplishments, and any like big name companies you may have worked at, or maybe even companies that are just very, very similar to the industry that you're applying to. That's also another good one. And sorry, I totally lost my train of thought. So sorry, we'll go on to the sheet unless
thanks for answering.
Thanks, Mario. Okay, so let's kind of look at this. And so before we started talking about this, actually, I was talking to Cassandra, and she's had this experience before with Dr. Selly, so I'm not here to say that it is completely like unthought of. A lot of the things I'm going to show you here are very practical, pragmatic, things that you may have thought of yourself, but I know during this time there's so much going on, so sometimes it's just different when you hear it from another person. So this is an exercise I've created with my very first cohort of ID interns. Most of my current cohort are people who already have master's degrees in instructional design and technology, or are currently getting one. However, they do not have instructional design portfolios, and they realize how valuable it is. So when I kind of like started this internship program, which only just launched, that is what we established would be our focus. During this time, each one of us will work on, and I will work on updating my portfolio as well. It's getting a little old and rusty out there, and you gotta stay on top of your game these days. So we can look at this. I'll just like zoom in a little bit more. All right. So and feel free to do this on your own time as well, because you'll probably be watching this as a recording. So so the questions. The first question is your name, but the second question is the background. So this should answer the question, tell me about yourself. They ask you this in every single interview I've ever had. So I've provided some bullet points with examples of what this should include. It could be your professional background, personal background, what you've studied or accomplished. Sometimes you can throw in a fun fact about yourself, but kind of keep that short. And you want to keep it very, very short, just maybe 2 to 3 short sentences or one very small paragraph. I did a worked example, since I know that's I learned from our very high quality program that worked examples are very, very important. And actually, I think that's the best way to learn most everything. So mine goes like this. I'm a senior instructional designer at the #1 ranked public university in the nation, UCLA. I've also worked as an instructional designer at a multi-billion-dollar real estate investment firm specializing in single-family housing. I've also worked in healthcare and the medical device industry at Edwards Lifesciences, which specializes in innovative health technologies such as heart valves. My experience working across various industries with a variety of stakeholders has given me a lot of flexibility and agility in customizing learning experiences for all kinds of learners. And usually if you have worked across different industries and the job you're applying for is in a different industry than what you've worked, you tend to meet with some resistance. And so when you are in that situation, you just should, I would urge you to try to highlight the different types of people you've worked with, especially if you have created some learning experiences. And it's okay if you weren't formally an instructional designer when you worked somewhere else, as long as you contributed to some sort of working experience. And if you are right now working outside of instructional design and you have a job, I would urge you to try to find, and it's really hard. Even though I was working at USC, it was so hard to find opportunities to kind of like implement what we were learning in our master's program, because it really depends also on your boss and what opportunities that they see available, and really how invested they are in helping you grow and find that career path. So it can definitely be hard, but one good thing is if they're trying to roll out any type of new technology program and you know how to use it, or they're trying to get people to use Excel or whatever it is, just be ready to volunteer, to create a job aid. Like job aids are what you do all day long when you're an instructional designer, especially in corporate L&D, but I also do it still in higher ed. So if you can find a way, to get that opportunity to make a job aid, to make an infographic, those are really easy ones where almost every job, can benefit from one. You just have to be very inventive. You have to really bug your manager or your supervisor and try to find that ability, that opportunity for yourself. I know it's really hard, and you have to keep advocating for yourself, and even if you get turned down like 20 times. So I think you guys are a feistier bunch, because a lot of what the conversation we had before this recording, it's like stuff that I didn't do until like at least a year after I graduated. So I'm glad. And if you're currently a student right now, this is the time to really, really push your faculty, push your current supervisor for those opportunities. It's going to make it that much easier for you. So the takeaway there is, even if you're not in the role, try to find opportunities to make job aids, to make infographics, videos if possible. That's probably going to be harder. And that's what you highlight when they ask you for your work experience. Even if you were answering emails, scheduling appointments, for 80% of your day, like you don't talk about that in your interview. You talk about that 1 or 2 job aids that you created during that time, right? And you highlight any value you added into like education. And it could even be like community outreach programs. So there's lots of opportunities. If your company doesn't normally do like educational things, maybe they do a once a year like job fair or something like that. And so you really have to like be on high alert for any opportunity that you can use, especially when you are in an administrative role or a role that is very far from instructional design. So don't give up, but you definitely have to be feisty and creative out there. Number 3, ultimate goal and dream job. So I would really, before you do anything else, I would just encourage you to take 5 minutes to yourself and just think about what your ultimate goal or dream job is and to write that down. And it should be very, very short, 1 sentence or maybe 3 short bullet points max, but you want to keep that very short. And I gave some examples because even in my own cohort, we have all different types of people. I've also met a lot of college professors, so not just K-12 teachers, but college professors who want to move over to instructional design as well. So some examples are, if you want to grow your consulting firm, maybe you want to work for yourself. You want that flexibility. You want to be in control of your future, more power to you. So maybe your biggest goal when you're starting out is probably going to be attracting those clients, right? Or maybe your job is to get hired at a big tech firm, right? They are the ones that pay top dollar, but I'll let you in on something else. Another place that pays really well industry-wise, I mean, it's been suffering lately, but pays really well and has a really good work-life balance is the energy industry. So oil and gas, SoCal Edison, PG&E, which I think stands for Pacific Gas Company and Electric. They're so good that actually, like, you'll even find these consultancy groups. That's what they are called, and they'll hire for these like 2-year positions at energy companies, and they pay like they can pay like 110K, and you have a much better work-life balance than you will at, say, like Amazon and Netflix. I mean, this is not bad talking. These are well-known facts. I've heard Google, has a better work-life balance, and then there's always good places to check for salaries, and just know that I've learned very recently that the salary caps that they show you on LinkedIn Salaries, or even like maybe like an ATD survey or other surveys, they may be accurate for the median, but your cap is much higher than you would think. So I used to think that you had to work for yourself to get like some big bucks in instructional design, but no, you can get it. It's mainly going to be at those big tech firms, and it is going to be very demanding and difficult, but it's out there, and it's good just to know that there are higher salaries out there. I think salary transparency is so important, and if you are looking for your very, very first and remember, again, even though I have looked this up a lot, I am still like an N group of 1 or a small N group. So take everything with a grain of salt. But if I were looking for my first instructional design job, I would be looking I would not be looking for anything below 60 or probably not below 65. I'd probably be looking in the 70 to, I think it might be hard to get 90 as like a junior instructional designer. Maybe as a junior instructional designer, probably 60 to 70, possibly 80, 75. But if you're going for like a senior instructional designer or regular instructional designer in LA, you can definitely get like 70 to 90, 70 to 110, but 110, you probably either have to come from a really big name or, have a lot of experience. So yeah. So just so you know, because I think when you look on some of these websites, they show them around like kind of like 60 or 50, much lower. And I am also, again, only familiar with kind of like the LA and San Francisco job market mainly, or big cities like Seattle. But but that's the range that I would probably recommend. So don't undersell yourself. Is what I'm getting at there, in case you do. I have seen some positions that are offering very little, but it's so important to get that first position. I mean, I picked up and moved to Arizona when I got my first role. So it is difficult getting your first role, and sometimes it's okay to take one that's maybe not super ideal for your first year. After you have that very first position, I guarantee you it's so much easier. Every other position you get will be so much easier. So let's see. So the ultimate goal and dream. So we went through some of that. Another example is and I've actually heard one of my ID intern people say this, or person say this. She said her ultimate goal was to work for an ethical company, hopefully one that does social good, and to have a good work-life balance. She has kids, she wants to have time with her family, and also to be able to work remotely. So I think it's very important to know what these things are. And it's just all about what's most important to you. And I would try to keep it like, one sentence or your top three things. Once you get into a laundry list of like 10 items, it's going to be really hard. I'm not saying you can't have it, but I'm saying it's good to know what's most important. And then the fourth question is really optional. It's just, throughout your master's program, you may have been exposed to different things. You've probably seen other people's portfolios. So just kind of thinking about whether or not you want to concentrate on a certain area. And this might happen more as you go through job descriptions that appeal to you. Some examples are user experience, 3D animation. I know we don't cover that in our program, but I think with like Adobe Animate, that's a thing. Or if you want to learn, like get really techie software engineering, learn Unity if you wanted to do kind of like, if you want to really get into learning games. And then, or maybe you just want to be a better live virtual presenter. That hasn't been a priority for me, clearly. But, or you want to conduct research that transforms K-12 education. And if you actually are interested in educational research, I would highly recommend looking up this group that I learned about maybe just a year ago, ERA, AERA. They do lots of really great educational research that's really aimed at transforming the world and our future generations. They go into things about ethics, diversity. They look at systematic injustices, and they do it all through looking at data. And a lot of their research is now open source. So I think that's pretty cool too. And we are 5 minutes over, so I am so sorry if anyone's still on. I'm going to try to wrap this up. So I'm just going to explain really quickly this kind of like job search exercise that I created, and maybe you've done something similar, but if you haven't, I think that this is a great way to get started. This is how I coached one of my teammates at my startup in finding her first instructional design job, which she was definitely an outlier. I think she had only applied to 5 jobs ever in her life. She graduated recently. She went from student worker to working for UCSD, and then she applied to this and she got it. So I would recommend you choose any career site or sites that you like. LinkedIn Jobs is really big now, but sometimes I'll still check ZipRecruiter and Glassdoor, and find at least 10, but up to 30 or more, really up to you, but at least 10 job descriptions that you find very appealing. So ignore location as a factor, because really we're trying to establish is what you like. So we're not actually like targeting these jobs yet. You can choose whether or not you want to use the salary range as a factor in this exercise. And if you're wondering whether or not you should use it, I would suggest that you go back to when you wrote about your ultimate dream job or goal. Was money in the top 3 that you named? If so, then maybe it's more important. But if it wasn't, then maybe you don't want to use that for this part of the exercise. So that's my suggestion with that. And I linked Kara North's article. It just came out in 2021. She and her colleagues, they took 100 posts for instructional design jobs, and they codified the different things that those jobs were looking for in terms of skills. So I've linked her article and it's open source. It's on Springer. She published it with Association for Talent Development, or ATD. It's a great article. There's also an easier version of that article, which is a summary that we produced on that. But she just gives you a framework for looking at job descriptions and figuring out what skills they want. So in this exercise, instead of looking at all ID job descriptions, I just want you to look at the ones that really speak to you, where you read it and you're like, oh, that's cool, I can see myself doing that. So once you have selected them, you are going to want to start organizing these. Okay. You are going to want to start organizing the skill sets. And so I have an example here. You can really organize them in whichever way you want or what you think is more appropriate. I just have some examples. Here are some software programs like Google products or even learning management systems. So actually one really hard thing is a lot of these jobs, when you're landing your first role, they want you to have experience with learning management systems, but you probably don't, because unless you're working in one, I don't know how you would, right? And but there is actually Canvas LMS has like a free version for teachers. So if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend that you look it up. You can even build your ID portfolio. I've seen some people do it. It's a little tricky, but you can build your ID portfolio in Canvas if you want. And I put Canva, my bad, Canvas. Canva is great too, but that's a totally different software. And Moodle, I think, also has a free version, so you can learn to use that. I mean, you won't get the full experience because you won't be assigning this to hundreds of thousands of people like you would have to, but you can get some experience using Canvas there, and you can also demonstrate that you know how to use it. It is by far the most widely used LMS system, both in higher ed and K-12. So if you are in the educational space, I would definitely recommend that. In the corporate L&D space, it's not, I mean, there's many other competitors as well. So Canvas, LMS, and Moodle do have free options so that you can get some familiarity, so you don't feel totally freaked out if that's something that they want you to have experience with. So here are just some examples. I won't go through all of that, as you can probably go through that in your own time. And then I just have a little bit of verbiage here, just saying that, it's really up to you how thorough you want to be in this exercise, because it's for you. So just know that, like, the more you are exact with this, the more you're going to know that for all the jobs that you want, let's say Adobe Creative Cloud came up 10 times. So you can get very quantitative with this, and that can help you figure out which skills you want to work on, because it's great to have, like, to know everything, but I don't think it's that practical. And even if you have some proficiency in everything, it can be good to just develop that expertise. And keep in mind, this is a little bit of a trick or a hack or a cheat, whatever you want to call it, but you can always buy your own software so that if you get very comfortable using some, and I know some of them are really expensive, but I will say TechSmith, Camtasia, and Snagit are probably the most affordable, and they're the only ones that aren't annual fees. So if you get that, and if you're really good at video editing in Camtasia, and maybe your whole team uses Premiere Pro, I mean, that's okay. Like, you may have to use what your team uses, but sometimes it's fine. If you have your own software, they'll let you use it. So don't feel like you have to spend tons of time frantically trying to learn every single thing. I would say just try to build expertise in a few different suites of software programs, and it'll serve you well. And always know that worst case scenario, you can have that program on your own computer. I do. so it's another option there. So hopefully that was helpful. I'll definitely share this doc with all these resources, and I think we are kind of out of time, so I don't know if we want to do any questions or if we want to kind of just wrap it up. You tell me, guys.
I actually have a question.
Sorry,
go ahead.
Mario.
No, go ahead, Cassandra. You were gonna
I was going to
explain.
say, if you have, sometimes we have a few questions in the chat that we'd love to ask you, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Let's see.
Let's see. We'll scroll back all the
I
way
know
to
there's some other,
Janelle.
I was gonna say, I know there's some other folks who started questions, so if you'd like to answer theirs first,
Okay.
and I can bring mine in after.
Okay. So the first question we have on is, the person who wrote it asked, they would love to hear about any experience you've heard about from IDs looking for work in K-12, whether schools or museum. I know you talked about specific skill sets. Do you think there are some that you've stood out for one versus like another? Because I know you delineated that it's very different corporate from higher ed. So what would you think in those types of spaces, this type of skill sets they should have in addition to their degree?
Definitely. Well, I'm definitely not an I'm definitely not an expert in K-12. I haven't worked in that space, but I do know that Canvas LMS is still the most widely used learning management system in K-12. So I would recommend definitely like signing up for that free teacher program and considering building at least part of your portfolio or exhibiting your proficiency in it. It's actually not a bad idea to build your portfolio in it, because I work in Canvas every day. And I think Amarina does too. So like and they actually push out, I think they push out new releases like every 2 weeks, very, very frequently. So it is always changing. So it's pretty good if you are going to the K-12 space. I think it is good to use Canvas LMS and to practice building in there. Unfortunately, I can't say too much more since I don't have experience in that.
The other question that they ask, and you've touched on most of the questions, so I'm going to skip ahead to the ones that you haven't touched on. So they're curious about contract work and how common that is for an instructional designer. And is it a good way to kind of get some experience before you kind of maybe go after the job, or in between you getting the job that you're looking for, your dream job or something like that? Do you have any thoughts on contract work?
Yeah, I think it's definitely good because you'll be working on real projects, right? With real constraints. So if you're, and sometimes those jobs are easier to land at first. They can be stressful because, your contract's coming up, you need to find your next gig. But, if you're in a time and space where you can do that, I would say definitely go for it. It's still another piece of valuable experience, and you're getting paid. So not bad. There's probably no benefits, but even the UCs, I can tell you from working at one and looking at a lot of those positions, a lot of them are contract now, and they'll do contract to permanent. So that's actually how I started at UCLA. They started me with a 1-year contract. It was cool because they gave me full benefits, but I've noticed it's getting really, really common. So although ideally, you're probably looking for a career position, contract positions can be good, and they did change me from contract to career. So I think UCs do that. So it can be good still.
That's awesome. The next question has to do with the branding. So if someone is already working in the field, for example, let's say they're working at USC or UCLA, and they've created some pieces that they now want to showcase on their portfolio, but there's branding attached to it. Do you have any tips for that?
Well, I say low key, always keep a file, always keep the original file, the articulate file, the RISE file. You're probably not supposed to do that, guys, but but as long as you take away anything that's proprietary information, you aren't sharing trade secrets, you aren't sharing another, it's a little bit tricky in higher ed because even I'm not positive about who owns certain content, right? Because I work at UCLA, and the instructors come in, and sometimes they build theirs. A lot of times, especially like where I'm at UCLA Extension, where we have a lot of the professional working people come in. A lot of those instructors, they build their course completely from scratch, but I'm not exactly sure how much of it UCLA owns versus how much they own. So that can be a little tricky. One thing I did suggest to someone recently is if you've worked with a faculty member and they really, really like you, perhaps they'd be open to writing a review for you. They could write a review for you on LinkedIn. Maybe they could write a nice quote for you on your portfolio so you could feature that quote next to your project. And maybe they'll let you use some of that material. But again, like your ID portfolio should be really high level. So you shouldn't have to worry too much about all the proprietary information, because you want to just really, really provide the highlights. So I think that's how I would approach it. Especially to faculty, if you're working with them, you're probably building a really good relationship, and they want you to do well. So I imagine a lot of them will be open to writing something nice for you and how it was like to work with you.
That's awesome. Do you have any other questions that may not be listed in the chat, but somebody would like to ask? I know, Mario, you said you had a question earlier. Jeannie?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, I heard you mention, and it was in your in your, I want to say aid, in your the file that you're sharing with us, the Google Doc. You were mentioning one part, and I thought it was pretty important because I was thinking about this way before you started. How would it, from the aspect of a consultant, you know, I mean, I know a lot of instructional designers are going out to establish a job, but for folks like me, it's like I'm coming from the consultant perspective as well. So I was wondering, how does that work, you know, for those of us who are entrepreneurs? What kind of ways can we, you know, kind of mold it? And I'm kind of doing this something similar that you are already doing in my process with the company called Learn, Train, Design. So it's the same kind of process of getting corporate instructional designers some of this knowledge so they can go back and use it in the field.
So I'm hoping I understood your question correctly. I think you're asking kind of like if you are wanting to be a freelance instructional designer or an entrepreneurial instructional designer. I mean, full disclaimer, my startup is very, very young. We launched August 17th, but we've been having very good traction on our website and on LinkedIn. You know, I think it's a very new space that's kind of emerging, and try not to cringe too hard when I say it, but ID influencer, right? We've got a few out there: Devlin Peck, Cara North, Robert Sargent, right, of Idle Courses. Luke Hobson's kind of like creeping up on that rise. There's been a few people, and yeah, and Cara North actually gave us a quote to use when we summarized her article. So that was pretty cool. I would say since I launched elearningdesigners.org, as of today, you know how on LinkedIn you can see how many profile views you get? I'm at about 870 views per 90 days. And I think before I launched, I was at about 80 to 88. So it's, you know, it's only been since August 17th. So if you are able to kind of,
that's like a week before mine. That's why.
Before you launched?
Yeah. I mean, I already had the company, but it's like a week before I actually launched Learn, Train, Design. So, and I've got similar track. I get what you're saying. It's the traction is growing. It's slow growing right now. However, I get what you're saying about a new space, and there's only a few social instructional designer influencers out there. So it's a model that we're all attempting to build. So that makes more sense. I just was like, could somebody help?
Yeah, I mean, Cara North has some really good videos. I just saw one recently on YouTube that she made like a year ago, but she kind of talks about how she built her following, in, you know, how she's kind of made her space. I mean, I think Devlin Peck is probably someone who's done it really successfully, right? He's known as an instructional designer. He's worked for himself for a long time, and you know, I didn't think that his background, not throwing shade, but I didn't think it was like crazy and outlier, spectacular in a certain way. So I think it's really, it's there for people who really are willing to provide value for their audience. I think if you are putting out consistent content, I mean, even LinkedIn it's hard to say because some things trend for non-content reasons, right? Some things are kind of like just like a cheap emotional thing. I feel like I see on LinkedIn all the time that's like, I just hired someone with 0 years of experience and I promoted them twice in this year. Now they're my top performer and like 20,000 likes. So yeah, so it's, I guess I'm saying LinkedIn can be a powerful tool, but not everyone who has followers necessarily has substance. You'll see even people who do have substance, you'll see kind of a mixture in what they're throwing out there, you know, some hard content, some soft stuff, some fluffy stuff. You'll see kind of the whole range. But if you're building your own business, I think that it's a great platform to really get your name out there. And if you're creating content, I think that's probably one of the easiest ways to start getting recognized. So
That's awesome. Do you have
yes,
any
I
last
forgot Tim
questions for us?
Slade. My bad. I totally forgot Tim Slade. Julie Dirksen, because I kind of
So
named all the
many.
younger LinkedIn people, but I didn't name some of the OG, like
Yeah.
even like Michael Allen, Allen
Right. Yes.
Interactions, right? So I didn't name all of them. And some of those people that are really big names, like at like DevLearn or these conferences, are not big names on YouTube. So it's been interesting to see them kind of like
Yeah, because they're only really big names in the
On
instructional
LinkedIn.
design community, or in the, I want to say, corporate learning community, so to speak.
I almost feel like it's more like there are big names in our industry, and now there are big names in our industry and in social media. Like of all the big names, right? A small segment is also big in ID social media, right? This is still not like broadly social media. No one's gonna get recognized at the airport, you know.
It's
But
kind of the same thing in the speakers arena as well. So I mean, in the new zone of speaker arenas. So, what were you going to say, Cassandra?
No, I was gonna say definitely being able to leverage social media to kind of put yourself out there or make yourself visible is one way to do it. And I think that's why Devlin is so popular. I think he was like, I don't want to say, I think he was one of the first people that was like, okay, I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to try to put out content and be seen and offer, these webinars and training sessions and put out as much information as I can. And then it was after that he started like leveraging that, like his popularity, like financially. Yeah. So I think that helped him, like all the free content. Because I mean, I was one of the people at first, like that's the first thing I look for first, free content. Now, once free content, when there's no more free content, then I go to the paywall. But that's just the reality of it. There's a lot of people, especially when they're transitioning and they're not sure if they do want to belong in that space or what to do. The free content does draw a lot of people in. So I think it was very smart to capitalize on that. And I definitely see a lot more people doing that, even the ones that are kind of limiting themselves to or kind of making LinkedIn like their own space, and you see them sharing out information, sharing out the projects that they're working on. So it's definitely one way to leverage yourself. Do we have any additional questions that I missed that we want to hit before I ask Cecile to give us sort of final words, biggest takeaway from you need an ender to current students, future students.
Okay.
Biggest takeaway.
I'll try to do this before I have a call with an instructor.
Yes.
So we can go over his course on Canvas LMS. So I guess the biggest takeaway is this is a very stressful time, and I totally understand that. And it can be very hard finding this first opportunity. Keep your mind open, keep your hopes up, but also be pragmatic. And I mean, I used to like make myself do an application like almost every day, and each application used to take me, at some point it was bad, especially before I found that software, but it could easily take me like 4 hours to do an application. And then sometimes LinkedIn has easy applies. Those also work pretty well. And actually the software, now I'm just going to end up selling the software program. I should really get hired by them. It's so good that you can actually feed it a whole collection of job descriptions, and then it synthesizes that and kind of brings up the most important or most repeated skills. And then you have like an option to upload a download of your LinkedIn profile, and then it looks at that across so it kind of does some of the manual like synthesizing that you'd have to do for your resume. So highly recommend that. Don't give up. Make sure your resume is on point, and apply. and find opportunities to create infographics and job aids. And even if you have no opportunities at work, you know, there's always something you could be creating an infographic on, and that can go in your portfolio. So
I love it. Thank you. And the first thing I'm going to do personally is go ahead and change learning design technology student to instructional designer.
Yeah,
I would update that. So thank you so much, Cecile. I'll let Mario end our talk with his wonderful DJ voice.
and he's muted.
Muted.
Well, I didn't even know I was doing that. Well, okay, let's do it then. So that was, it was great to have you, Cecile. And I really I have a page full of notes here. I just like, I know that you were a little bit worried about presenting. I know that you were a little bit worried about taking that aspect on, just like we all are. And as you said in your presentation, we tend to focus on the areas that we have our strengths. You kind of said it in your presentation. And I love this idea that we can all get together and learn from each other, through this voyage, and as well learn how to grow as a group to go out there and get jobs, because we're all going to be in this industry together. We're all going to be working together in this industry, some way, some shape or form, whether it's on the K through 12 adult learning side or the adult corporate learning side. So I just really appreciate everything you've brought to the table. And I really hope a lot more people get a chance to hear what you have to share. So that's it today for us, folks. I hope you enjoyed this presentation of the LDT Speaker Series with Cecil Cheng.